Fintech is having a WhatsApp moment in India and we'll see a lot more innovations going forward. That is the word coming in from UK's Special Envoy for Fintech in India, Eileen Burbidge. In an exclusive chat with 18 Hours Tanveer Gill, Burbidge also says that technology disruptions are inevitable and it will pave the way for further growth. Let's listen in.
Whether it's WhatsApp or Uber, you see technology disrupting all industries of all shapes and sizes. So they already affected publishing, it already affected news, it's affected content, music, things like that. It's inevitable that it's going to come and sort of help innovate or actually accelerate and modernize financial services, which is what makes the world go round. And that is what's happening now, and that's what everyone is describing as fintech.
Right. And so as part of the summit, where there's going to be a lot of interaction between UK and Indian companies, trying to cause disruption in the space, what have been your observations? Where is the future for both these countries collaborating to take innovation forward?
I think there's a couple of things. First thing, I think that fintech actually isn't always about disrupting existing financial services. I think it is about modernizing and accelerating innovation, which is a very good thing. But along those lines, then I think what's happening in the two different countries is slightly off kilter right now, because I think India is focusing on a very domestic and internal solution and trying to actually modernize some of the financial services and maybe the publicly owned banks, whereas companies in the UK are thinking a lot about export, and not only the UK domestic market, but then how it can actually export services and delivery to India and lots of other markets. And what the two can share between each other has a lot depending on the market size that we have here in India, and so there's a lot to think about.
Right. And India's project in the unique identification number, which is Aadhaar, is really spearheading the adoption of the digital platform. So what have been your observation thus far, and how far we have gone in achieving that objective?
Well, from what I've seen, it's just one of the things that's been happening over the last few years, or the last sort of period of time when the Indian government has also been thinking about this digital India moment. And it affects fintech and financial services, because actually there's also an emphasis on having the banks opening up their data and also having new banks come along. And I think all of it is reflective of the attitude and the ambition of the Indian government to try and accelerate some of this innovation, and again by learning from other jurisdictions, whether it's the UK and collaborating with us, or other markets as well.
Right. And what do you make of the initiative in an extension of that move in the Unified Payments Interface?
I don't know the details about the Unified Payments Interface, but I do know that that's going to help SMEs or new startup companies try and get into the market a little bit faster than they would have otherwise. And I think, again, that's a really good sign. It's another piece of evidence that everything's moving forward very, very quickly.
Right. Do you see a PayPal or a Square coming out of India?
I think there's no reason. The domestic market in India is greater than that was originally addressed by a PayPal or a Square. And actually, some of the mobile payment solutions that already exist in India probably have greater number of users and consumer touchpoints than any of the other ones that we've seen come out of, say, the United States.
Right. WhatsApp is also kind of adopting a payment model. Do you think that messaging services adopting the payment structure or the payments model of business is something that is going to define the future?
I have a very short answer for that, but yes, absolutely, and I think so, which is why fintech is so important, and collaboration between existing banks, for example, and new SMEs is so important, because otherwise, I think the threat is not fintech startups. The threat is coming from messaging platforms or web platforms like Alibaba, like WeChat, like some of the big internet giants starting to offer payment solutions or financial services, which is why for the existing industry, it's imperative for them to embrace and collaborate with fintech companies.
Right. So where do you see the next source of innovation within fintech coming, especially in the India context?
I was going to answer first of all generally. So generally I think the next wave of fintech innovation will probably be on the back end of service delivery. So whether it's for regulatory compliance, identification, verification, because the world is moving beyond, say, payments and remittance businesses, for example, so away from B2C and to B2B. Now specifically in the Indian context, I actually think what's going to happen is a slightly different way of looking at things, in that right now India is very focused on the domestic opportunity and probably looking to modernize the publicly owned banks and trying to get that to be slightly more liberalized before opening its borders a bit and looking at letting other suppliers come into the country or to export some of the solutions from India. So you're working on investing in your current ecosystem, and I think that's the right way forward.
Right, but in that context, I mean, so fine, you know, there are new fintech companies, there's new innovation happening in that domain, especially on the payment side of the business, but how crucial then would the cause of protection be, you know, building up security measures and businesses around protecting these services, because at the end of the day, it's really about finance, right, and protecting people's finances and dealings in the same.
No, absolutely. So there's two ways to look at that, and one, I think, is the regulator. It's the regulator's responsibility to protect consumers and also other businesses, which of course it does with great diligence. But the other point is cybersecurity as its own subsector of fintech. So there's a huge opportunity for cybersecurity startups, cybersecurity SMEs to help protect the integrity of the data and the transactions, and to make sure that consumer service quality doesn't get compromised as we continue to deliver.
Right. Aside of fintech, you're also a top-notch venture capitalist back in the United Kingdom. How are you looking or sizing up the Indian startup ecosystem?
I think the Indian startup ecosystem generally, whether it's fintech or otherwise, has always been really, really attractive to investors from all over the world. And you saw that when a lot of US investors set up venture funds here, even Chinese investors setting up venture funds here. And it's because there's always been such a high bar for highly skilled, you know, really, really talented IT developers. Obviously, India leads the world in terms of that, and I think that's why now we're looking to see what innovative services and new creative business models might emerge from the continent.
Right. What about funding? Because I think over the last 1 year, there's been a bit of a scale back in funding, and you know, venture capitalists have been more selective about where they, you know, make their investments. In an environment where, you know, with rates going up, liquidity conditions will also tighten. We've enjoyed 8 years of easy money, and that's going to start withdrawing at some point. So how do you think, you know, startups would approach funding from here on, and what are VCs looking at when it comes to, you know, evaluating such proposals for investment?
Yeah, well, I think the best companies always get funded. They don't ever see a funding cap, and so it might just be a situation where you're seeing natural selection at work. The quality is going to have to increase. That's a function of market dynamics. It's not a bad thing. But then to answer the second part of your question, VCs are always looking for something that's unique and defensible. And I think from what I've understood and learned this last couple of days here in India, so far a lot of the investment has gone into sort of like a land grab situation where people are trying to be first to market to deliver solutions or try and increase their market share as quickly as possible. I believe what VCs will look for, at least in the Indian market, is now unique offerings, defensibility, and perhaps some specific innovation that's not just simply a land grab or a rush to acquire customers.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/ETNow.